Hi, I'm Valerie,
And I'm Taylor.
and welcome to
Whimsy Gossip,
where we talk all things fantasy.
and our favorite ways to escape reality.
Today's episode.
Today's episode, we have Gregg Hale, the producer of the Blair Witch Project and one of the creators of Emerald Anvil, a multi platform that's like fantasy based. And right now, you guys probably heard about the Black Velvet Fairies, if I can speak right. I'm just too excited. I just finished listening to the episode earlier, and I have so many questions for Greg. So anyway, hi Greg, welcome to the
Hey guys,
podcast.
thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for coming on. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So if you want to maybe give everyone a little introduction. So on Whimsy Gossip, here we talk all things fantasy, our favorite ways to escape reality. And I truly feel like Black Velvet Fairies right now for me is my little reality escapism. And I feel like it's almost blending my reality and my fantasy world. And I don't know if that was the point, but
Yeah.
it is hitting the nail on the head if that is what it's supposed to do.
Yes,
It is.
that's awesome because that's exactly what it's supposed to do.
Oh, okay. Because it's blending really, it's making it really real. Like
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah,
wait.
yeah. That's absolutely the point. That's awesome. That's so cool that that's your reaction to it. Yeah. So Black Velvet Fairies is a podcast, like you're saying. I think episode 5. I don't know when this is going to air, but episode 5 just dropped, so it comes out every Tuesday. Season 1 is 13 episodes, and it's
Okay.
available on every podcast platform that there is, as far as I know. We're doing it with PRX, um, and Black Velvet Fairies, like is the podcast, and it's one of 4 interconnected, standalone but interconnected stories that we're telling that are all part of the Emerald Anvil story world. So
Oh,
the Emerald Anvil story world, in a nutshell, is centered on this dangerous fairy realm called Hada,
okay.
which is
I've heard of
uh,
Hada. I've heard of Hada.
yes, we've heard it many times on Black Girl Fairies. So Hada is
Yes.
this fairy world, which is literally a fairy planet that has been connected to Earth for centuries, for thousands of years of interaction between these two worlds. And we are starting to tell stories about the Earth Hada connection with contemporary present day stuff by and large. So the main storyline is a novel called Journey to Hada, which comes out in May 21st.
Good
And that
day.
is like a young adult uh, fantasy novel set on 2 kids from Portland, Oregon, where I live. They're actually
Hmm.
modeled on both of my kids, Morgan
Oh.
and Ryan DeLeon. They get teleported. Very short story. They get teleported to this fairy world, and their arrival,
Ooh.
which all these fairies have religions that humans are a part of. Either humans are the pathway to nirvana, like I've got to interact with humans in order to make it to heaven or whatever, all the way to humans are basically demons and we must kill them all. Um,
Wow.
so
Oh.
when the kids show up, it basically kicks off this big religious war between all the fairies and the kids, who
Oh.
don't call themselves fairies, by the way. They call themselves Hadin because they're from Hada. They know that we call them fairies. They don't call themselves that. But it kicks off a giant war amongst the Hadin. And that's the very beginning of it. And, in success, we're hoping this is going to be 9 novels telling the story of Morgan and Orion on Hada. Um, then we're
Oh.
doing a board game, which the Kickstarter for the board game actually starts in less than a week, which makes me a little
I
nervous.
saw that you guys had games on like your the flyer thing that you guys sent. I was like, "Oh, this is really interesting. A way to like really immerse people in it."
Yeah, yeah. So the board game we're gonna kickstart the board game. We made the board game with Together Studios, which are game designers here in Portland who are amazing.
Oh, that's cool.
The game has been really well received so far, and the board game is more of a, so the way we're uh, doing the board game. If you watch the video, um, the Glim video, which is on the Kickstarter, or you could go to Emerald Anvil's YouTube channel and see it there. We're telling the story, like Taylor said at the beginning, blending the reality of Earth and the reality of the game. So what the game is like I said, humans and Hada have been interacting for centuries. So coming back, humans come back and forth. The Hadin can never come to Earth, but humans can come back and forth. Um, so humans saw the Hadin playing this for the Hadin as a gambling game. Humans saw it, brought it back to Earth, and over decades, centuries, humans changed it and turned it into a game to teach other humans about Hada.
That's
Ah.
So
so
the
smart.
game, the game, which is called Glim, which is what the Hadin call the power that they use to make their wings, even though they're called wings, they make blades that come out of their hands that are made out of this energy. Um, that's called Glim. So the game is called Glim, and the game kind of teaches you big picture. Here's the world, and here's the types of Hadin that are in this world, and it's a really cool game.
I
So
wanna
that's
play this game. We gotta get a copy
Is
of this
this like
game.
a Dungeons and Dragons kind of game? Like a not a
well,
D&D, like
it's
a kind of like those board games you can play with your friends who are also a little nerdy.
yes, oh,
Yes.
100%,
Ah, that's my
100%.
kind of game. Okay.
Yeah,
Yep, that's
Taylor,
my
100%.
I
kind of
wanna
game.
play this with you so bad.
Yeah.
It's not overly complicated.
Perfect.
It's a really elegant game. And we've and speaking of Dungeons and Dragons, some of like the OG, one of the game designers, Keith Baker, him and his wife Jen Ellis made the game. He's like a rock star in the Dungeons and Dragons world. So he let all his other rock star Dungeons and Dragons friends play Emerald Anvil. Play Glim, and people are really liking it. It's a lot. It's a really fun game. There's a lot of strategy and a lot of nuance, but it's really simple. Like you
Yeah.
can play one turn basically, and you understand how the game is played, which is kind of
Mhm.
cool.
My husband needs
So
that. Yeah.
yeah. Um, so um, so that's the game, and then the third platform is uh, the novel. So podcast, board game, novel, which I talked about, and then we're going to do an interactive storytelling game that right now we think is going to use NFTs as
Okay.
the currency, or the functionality of the game is going to be built around NFTs, but we're still kind of figuring that out because the NFT market is always changing. But regardless of the technology that we use, the idea is that have you ever played Risk, the
Mhm.
game Risk?
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know, okay.
Oh my
So
gosh.
imagine Risk, but instead,
Relationships have almost ended because of
yeah,
Risk. My husband, we were in an alliance and he turned on me. Oh my god,
oh,
breakup almost happened. I was
yeah,
like, "How dare you?
yeah, you can't trust Risk
Can't
alliances.
trust your own husband."
It always goes wrong because eventually you're going to have to fight each other. Never works.
Fair.
Never works. Never works. So imagine Risk, but instead of, I think it's 42 countries, it's 6,000 hexes. So imagine, so Hada is a planet, right? We're taking a portion of Hada and dividing it up into 6,000 hexes, and you can buy that hex, and you will literally own that piece of the story world for forever. And we will always, if we're successful and we keep making stuff, we're always going to connect the story that's happening everywhere to an aspect of the hex that you own. Maybe not
That is
specifically.
so cool to
Yeah.
really get your community involved. That
Yes.
is so cool.
And we're literally going to, based on how people buy, like which kingdoms they want to buy,
Mhm.
that will determine how big the kingdoms are and how powerful they are. And that is actually going to be reflected in the second novel, because in the first novel the kids have a very limited view of what's going on. They're 14 and 11, so when they get there they are aware of very, very little. So they only know of four of the kingdoms, and they're actually only in one of them. They only hear of three other ones, but there's dozens. So all the other ones are basically fair game. We can do whatever
Yeah.
we want from a canon story world perspective. So how people buy their piece of what kingdom depends on, will determine how big the kingdom is, how powerful the kingdom is, and then we're going to do an interactive story thing on Discord where people are actually going to vote on what their kingdoms, which the Hadin call dominions, what the different dominions do, like military stuff, cultural stuff, um, socioeconomic stuff. And we're going to do that for weeks and create all these little stories that the players are actually creating through their voting, right? We're going to set up
Yeah.
the scenarios, but how you vote is going to determine it. So this is a very long-winded answer to your question of what Emerald Anvil is. Multi-platform fantasy story world with a podcast, which Black Velvet Fairies, which we can talk about, novel, Journey to Hada, board game, Glim, and a storytelling game called Battle for Hada.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh.
And
Yes.
maybe one day a
Busy.
movie.
Very,
Oh,
and
yes.
I mean, obviously, I'm a filmmaker,
Yeah.
uh, and yes, obviously, one day I would love to make a $200 million, version of Emerald Anvil. But our goal and our philosophy on this is my main creative partner Eduardo Sanchez and I've been creative partners for 28 years
Oh
since
my
film
gosh.
school. We made Blair
That's
Witch
so
together, and a bunch of other stuff.
Oh.
Um, we're mostly like indie filmmakers, which
yeah.
means we come up with the idea, we write the script, we raise the money, we make the movie, we sell the movie, we chase the money. And so our idea with this is like, let's take a really what would be as a TV show or a movie or even a platform video game, console video game, what would be a massively expensive thing. This is giant epic fantasy with, thousands of flying fairies and fairy wars and all
Yeah.
this jazz, would be massively expensive, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like we can go out and write a script about this and somebody's going to give us $200 million.
Yeah.
So our idea is we raised a little bit of money and we made these, 4 platforms that are all way cheaper, obviously, than
Oh yeah.
making even a
100%.
simple video game, right? So
But then now you have the hype behind it to like
exactly, now I have to get on Whimsy Gossip and talk about it and, hope that it catches on, right? Because
yeah.
we've put almost all the money on the screen, so to speak. Hopefully that shows in Black Velvet Fairies. I'm super
Mhm.
proud of Black Velvet Fairies. We've got a little bit of marketing money, not a lot, but we're really kind
Yeah.
of hoping that people like it. And then I talk to fans like you, which is why I think what you guys are doing with Whimsy Gossip and your fan films and stuff is so exciting, because you're exactly the kind of fandom that we would, love to start generating, right? People who are passionate about it, who take ownership
Aw.
of the ideas. So I'm super excited to be on your show and super
That means a
respect.
lot to us. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, you guys are doing great. You guys are doing
Because we
great.
just feel like these, we started a year ago, this podcast. And then obviously chapter 54 came out in December. We're working
yeah.
on a second film now, but like totally resonate with the fact of like trying to crowdsource. And these things are super freaking
So
expensive to do, as you know. And, so yeah, I just really appreciate
Because
that.
we are
And like
literally
appreciate
just
that you also
I feel
watched our film.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
well, wait,
weird.
don't you guys have two?
Oh, we do. We
Technically,
have
yeah, yeah.
The,
technically,
yeah,
yeah. So we have
you,
a film and then like a short,
right.
Yeah, a mini.
yeah. And then
Yeah.
we're working on the next one we're working on is going to be like we're hoping 20 to 25 minutes.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
That's major.
yeah.
That's a lot.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I
But
mean, we're not like any I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty bugged out that you've actually seen it. Because it's very surreal because I have like a theater background and a little bit of acting, but it's more or less like I took a break from that. I feel like I work as an X-ray tech full time in the medical field, and then Whimsy Gossip is my fun creative outlet, and reading really is as well. And then yeah, that was just kind of like one of our best friends, Steven, I call him Sven. He is a DP and he is phenomenal. And
it
he
looks tells
essentially
tells Finn, good job, because I think it looks great.
oh, thank you. He's so cool. He's a cool dude. We love him so much. But yeah, he helped produce that whole thing for us. So it kind of had me dipping my feet in there. And then this one, I'm more or less like we're taking the reins on it, kind of doing it ourselves this time. He's obviously still there for guidance because he's going to shoot it for us again. But um, yeah, filmmaking, there's so much that goes into it that no one has any idea. Like,
It's a little bit more than you think that it's gonna be, and mostly boring, right? And that's the other
yeah,
thing about it is like
A
whenever
lot of
like
not fun parts. A lot of not fun
a
parts.
lot of waiting around and waiting for this or waiting for that, or
Yes.
adjusting little things and big blah bloop.
Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
that. So,
The
okay,
best part, I think, is being on set, though.
oh,
Like,
that's the
when
fun
you
part.
finally get to that point and you get to just be and, like, watch it all come together, that is, like, what
Yes.
I'm most excited for with, the Chapter 70 project that we're filming this fall. I'm just like, I can't wait to just stand there and just look at everybody and be like, "Oh my god, this is actually happening.
Like
We're
all of
doing
this is
something."
worth it because we've been it's been a headache. But okay, so I have
Yes.
so many
Sorry.
questions. So
Yes.
Black Velvet Fairies, we got to dive back into that because again,
Yes.
I was just left on. It's Thursday when we're filming, and every episode comes out on Tuesdays. The new episodes.
Black Velvet Fairies. Yes, every
Okay,
Tuesday.
so Black Velvet Fairies is one of the ways you're going to learn about this world of Hada, correct?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so Black Velvet Fairies is told like I feel like when I was listening to it, the best way I can describe it is last year when I read the ACOTAR series for the first time. I felt very strange because I read the whole ACOTAR series and then I went to Scotland. And when I was in Scotland and before I left for Scotland, everyone kept telling me because it was around like the 5th of May and everyone's like, "Oh, the veil is thin. Be careful for the fairies.
Oh
Oh, be
wow.
careful for the fairy rings." And the whole time I was in Scotland, people were like, "Oh, be mindful of the fairies. Be
Yeah.
mindful of the fairies." And I was like, are they really real? And I was like, I was so confused. And
Yeah.
as I was listening to your podcast, like Black Velvet Fairies, I was listening to this, and the only thing I will say that took me out completely that I was like, this is not really someone having their own podcast and the whole situation is the voice actor, the female. She has such a nice way of speaking that I know she's vocally trained. I was like, she is. And they said like she used to be a theater major and she was an actress. And I was like, okay, so maybe that's why. But truthfully, when I was listening to it for the first time, because again, Valerie handles all of our business stuff. And I
Right.
just, was showing up and I was like, okay, Valerie's like, listen to the podcast. I said, okay.
Yeah.
So I did. I
I did listen
stopped.
to the first episode, though.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
intrigued.
I'm on, I think on episode 3, I stopped and I was like, hold up. Is this like, because you started introducing real guests and
Which are all real. Which
real
are all real experts. Yeah. Yeah.
genius, because I was convinced that this was real. And I had to full on stop listening, go on through and look up and be like, is this really real? Like, or is this like, are they actors? And then finally, it said like the actress's name and then the character she was portraying. And I was like, that is my only indication right now that this is actually not like a real like a real person's story talking about
Yeah.
like what they're experiencing right now. And I was just so shocked. I'm not gonna lie, I was so
Oh wow.
intrigued. And I because again this time last year I was really looking up because I had an ex-boyfriend from Ireland and his mom was she's very Catholic, but she was always very mindful of the fairies in her
Yeah.
garden. She would leave tokens
Yeah.
out, very mindful, and I was always like, I thought she was crazy. Sorry, Anne, but I thought she was crazy. I was like, really? It's fairies. They're not real. Like, come
Yeah.
on. And then last year when I went to Scotland and my best friend lives in Scotland and we were walking around Edinburgh and we went to this beautiful park and I was like, yeah, just chatting with like the locals and they're like, oh yeah, just be mindful of the fairy rings. If you see one, walk away
Wow.
from them.
Okay.
And I was like, what?
Yeah.
And then I
It's like a
listened to this
thing.
podcast and I was like sitting there for 2 seconds, like, hold the phone. I'm the most confused in the world right now because I
I
was full
love
on
it. I love
convinced.
it. I love it. I love it. Yeah,
Yeah, that,
it's only gonna get more confusing for Lucy, the main character, Lucy
yes,
Bedell, which is played by Gretchen Lodge, who I think is amazing.
she
Uh,
is. Her voice is so soothing.
yeah, we made a really horrifying movie with Gretchen called Lovely Molly
Oh boy.
that she's
Ooh.
the star of. That is a pretty dark horror film, but she is absolutely amazing in it. And we made a short film with her that was part of an anthology called Portals.
Oh,
Um,
I'll check it
That's
out.
cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
she's an amazing actress. Chris Osborne, who plays her
James?
friend James,
Yeah.
he another great actor. Also, an actor that our Bigfoot movie Exist. He was the lead in our Bigfoot movie. So when we got around to casting this, Jane Fleming as one of our executive producers, along with Mark Ordesky, who executive produced Lord of the Rings.
That's
So
insane.
we have some Lord of the Rings cred going on.
Yeah, my husband freaked out about that because everyone on that's listening can judge me right now. By the time when I started dating my husband, I had never seen Lord of the Rings.
Same.
What?
My husband made me watch it too.
I
What?
was
You
a
haven't watched it either? Wait a minute. What kind of fantasy fans are
I was
you
a
exactly?
star. So
Harry
growing up,
Potter.
Oh,
growing up,
Harry
I
Potter.
was like a
Okay.
Star Wars girly. My dad like took me
Star
to
Wars, Harry Potter, yeah.
every midnight showing. Like my first Halloween costume, I
Wow.
was baby Leia with like little knit like buns on my head. So I was oh,
Ah, Star
okay.
Wars.
So, so,
Okay.
so Star Wars is absolutely why I'm a filmmaker,
Oh, I think I know. What is
and
it
same
saying?
and same with Ed, and
Great.
that's from the original um, run. That's always been my favorite Star Wars poster, and that's from the original run. And I actually met Greg Hindlebrandt, who painted it with his brother Tim, and he very kindly sent me one.
Wait, what episode? What episode of Star Wars is it?
Well, okay, to me, Star Wars is just
The first
Star
the
Wars is the first one. I don't. I really have a difficult time calling it A New Hope
Okay, okay.
Mm.
because it wasn't New Hope when I saw it. It was
Oh.
Star
it was
Wars.
just Star Wars. They didn't do
Yeah.
the whole Episode 4 New Hope thing until later. Like
Okay, okay.
when it
Ah.
first came out, it just said Star Wars. That was it. It
Okay.
was not no episode, no nothing.
Interesting. I
So
didn't
the
know that.
OG Star Wars in '77. I'm 58, so I was 11 years old.
Oh,
Perfect age.
what a time. Yeah.
Yeah.
You must have been freaking out.
I mean, when Darth Vader, I know it's so crazy. I probably saw it the first weekend that it was out, and I know the moment I decided to be a filmmaker because when Darth Vader walks at the very beginning, Rebel Blockade Runner, they blow the door apart. You know, the stormtroopers blow the door apart, and Darth Vader walks through. My my brain exploded. Like I didn't understand what was happening to me, but I was old enough, so I was young enough to just be like completely floored, but just old enough to realize there's a camera there, and there are people behind the camera doing stuff, and I don't know what it is that they're doing, but if you get to make that, that's what I want to do. Whatever they're doing, that's what I want to do. And then from
Well,
then on out, my whole life was built around
film.
um, trying to become a filmmaker.
About it.
So when Cupid was 5 or 6 years old, they were super into Tinkerbell. I mean, all fairy things, but
Oh.
specifically Tinkerbell, like the Tinkerbell, the standalone Tinkerbell movies, which are actually pretty
So
good.
good.
They're really
Yeah.
good.
They're
The
not. They're
Pirate
not bad,
Fairy, they're
huh?
good.
Yeah. So I watched all those. They loved them. I created a fairy character for them to start interacting with, and the fairy would write them letters and bury stuff in the backyard and do all this stuff. And it just kind of
You
got
are
me
such a
thinking.
cool dad.
This is going to go to exactly what you were saying, Taylor, about the reality thing, our world. I started thinking, what would be like a fairy based, story world that would be interesting to me as an adult fantasy fan. And it
Hmm.
really, it obviously it's centered on kids. It obviously centered on kids having a connection to this world. But I really wanted it to be like a physical, tangible connection between the worlds,
Hmm.
because normal Fae stuff like Corathorn and Roses, they're just in another reality. Earth
Yeah.
is not, at least in the book that I read, Earth is not. It's just a different
Yeah.
place. Earth
Yeah.
is not
Yeah.
Totally
connected.
different.
They're human, or she's human or human like, I
It's the
guess.
mass verse, the Sarah J. mass
Mass
verse.
first, right? Mass first. So she's, that those characters, just like Game of Thrones, is not Earth, right? That's
Hmm.
Right.
just a different.
Or Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. No, Lord of the Rings is actually supposed to be Earth.
Is
Oh,
it?
but it's like Middle Earth and stuff,
It's
right? Though, like,
Middle
it's
Earth.
kind
No,
of.
but that's the history. It's supposed to be like this lost
Ah.
history of Earth.
Oh,
Mm.
see, that's how much I've only watched the movies one time through. I'll be honest with you.
Well, we'll talk about that later. Um, but so I started thinking, what would be a fairy mythology that I would be into as an adult fan of fantasy? And it
Mm-hmm.
started with this tangible connection. Like, how would it be connected? Because I didn't want it to just be magic
Yeah.
and the fae, because like when you were in Scotland or whatever, right? The whole thing with fairies and fairy circles is, and if you listen to Black Velvet Fairies, our expert John Cruz, who's really a fairy expert, wrote like 12 books on fairies.
Oh no, I looked all these people up because I
Yeah,
was
they're all
floored.
real. They're all
That's
real.
so
Well,
cool.
mostly real. I won't tell you who's not real. Mostly
Ooh.
real. There's some people later who are not real.
Oh, okay.
But if you listen to John Cruz's interview, which I wish we could make those sections longer, but we're trying to keep the storytelling kind of condensed. But basically, interacting with fairies is dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Like most fairy interactions, like British Isles fairies, which is mostly what we think of as fairies, is almost all cultures in the world have a fairy of some sort, right? Little beings that live somewhere else, and you interact with them, and sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. Almost every culture on the planet has a version of a fairy. What we as Americans, or Northern Hemisphere,
Tinkerbell.
Tinkerbell, what we think of as fairies is usually British Isles
Mm.
fairies, like Ireland, Scotland,
Mm-hmm.
Britain, right? That's what we think of fairies. Those fairies, most of your interactions with them are bad,
Yeah.
right? Like if you get caught in a fairy circle, they take you to the fairy world and don't let you come back, or you come back 40 years later and you haven't aged and everybody that you know is dead,
Is older. Yeah.
or they trade your kid with some weird deformed fairy thing and take your kid back to, or they take your stuff or they steal it or whatever. So his whole thing is like, it's kind of dangerous, but it's definitely magical, right? Like it's a magical place. In Emerald Anvil, what we've tried to do is almost, and I love that you guys are Star Wars fans for many reasons, because ultimately Emerald Anvil kind of has a sci-fi angle to it
Mm-hmm.
as well, because Hada is a physical place, and it has these, to the Hadin, they're natural devices that look like big giant mountains that are portals, and that's what allows them to connect to Earth. Um, but and then they have wings, they can fly, but they're not like butterfly wings or dragonfly wings or hummingbird wings or
Yeah.
whatever. There's this energy on Hada called Glim, and the Hadin, when they're born, and it took them thousands of years to figure this out. It just didn't happen. They figured it out. They figured out that here's this energy and we can feel it flowing through us, but what can we do with it? And it took them thousands of years to figure out how to manipulate this energy. And one of the first things they figured out was, oh, when a baby is born, we can change their spinal column using the glim, and these things will appear behind them and they can fly, right? so
Oh.
so their wings, they call them glyphs, are really just these manifestations of this energy. And your glyph looks different based on where you're from. So it's almost like the Hadin don't have last names, they have a first name, and then if you really want to know somebody, you show them your glyph, and your whole family history is built into your glyph, where you're from.
Wow.
If you're a noble, you have big fancy crazy wings. If you're a poor person, they're simpler, and you could look at them and go, oh, that's a poor glyph or whatever. They can
So
make
I have a
I'm
great.
question.
loving this world building. I'm
Right.
loving
So
this world building.
this when she closes her eyes and she says, "I can still see them." Like when I close my eyes, is that because of this like essence, this magic, essentially like this power source? It's like really there
Well,
in the
for
painting.
Lucy, and, yeah, and I have to be careful about what I
Okay.
say.
Okay.
Mm.
Okay.
You've only listened
If
to
it's a
episode
spoiler,
3.
it's okay.
Well,
I will.
okay,
We don't have
okay,
to talk about it.
clearly, right? Okay, so here's the story is, we haven't even said what the story is. The basic story is a woman, Lucy Verdell, and you guys know this, right, from um, the listening to the first episode.
Hmm.
Um, Lucy Verdell's grandmother dies. Her grandmother leaves her 4 black velvet paintings of fairies. That's the only thing that she leaves her. And this is a grandmother that she's been completely estranged from. She loved her and had an amazing relationship with her when she was little, but then things got strange with her parents, and now she hasn't seen her and heard from her in 20 something years. She dies. She leaves her these black velvet paintings, and Lucy immediately has some sort of metaphysical, supernatural connection to these paintings. They feel like they're more than just the paintings, right?
Paintings.
So
Yeah, she's drawn to them.
yeah, she's drawn to them and she's feeling something. And then, as you know from the first episode, something kind of supernaturally happens in the attic when she finds them, right? That we do the ghost expert comes
Yep.
and talks about, right? And I love the ghost expert's name is Greg Newkirk. He really is a paranormal researcher, ghost expert, ghost hunter guy.
I
I
was
love what he,
intrigued.
yeah, and I love what he was talking about. Like, what's the difference if you talk about alien stuff or ghost stuff or fairy stuff? They're kind of all the same
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways, right?
Mm.
Beings that fly, beings that appear to you in the middle of the night, beings that take you somewhere and maybe they bring you back, maybe they don't, right? That's all things that like ghosts or fairies and aliens all kind of have in common. So I love that idea. So clearly, uh, Lucy's grandmother had some sort of connection to these paintings. And the whole idea that Lucy is going to explore is some people that she's already starting to interact with are saying, no, these are paintings of things that really exist. This isn't an
Yeah.
imagination. This is a painting of something that exists, right? Um, and how that connection manifests is what Lucy is exploring. So I can't say much more
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
without
Ah.
without getting into the
Spoiling it, yeah.
Yeah.
course. But I will say this: the very end of the very end of the podcast, Lucy ends up at a place doing a very specific thing, and that scene in the podcast crosses with a scene in the novel, a very important scene in the
Oh,
novel.
I love that.
A very important scene in the podcast crosses with a very important scene in the novel, right?
Wow.
And
Yeah,
then
it's
I will
so
just say that the novel continues on its way, and then a portion of the story with the novel was going to stay connected to Lucy. So now in
Okay.
season 2, Lucy is going to be even more connected to things that are happening in the novel, because
yeah,
ultimately all the stories are interconnected,
Connected.
right?
intertwined.
How many seasons do you guys currently have planned for the podcast?
That's a very good question. I think three. I
Okay.
Okay.
think three.
That
And
makes me sad because I think I would want more, but it's fine.
well, if I told you, I can't tell you why there's only going to be three. Um,
Okay. Oh, I
but
have
I
chills.
think why there's only going to be three is really cool. Like
Okay.
we know where it's going. And I
Okay.
think if you listen to the whole episode, if you listen to the whole season 1, what happens in the very last episode, you're gonna kind of know. I think you're gonna kind of know where it's going. I
Okay.
think
Okay.
you'll
Okay.
That's
see
exciting.
where
Yeah.
I
they're
think
headed.
it's so cool how it almost feels like it's like kind of like the graphic audios. Like I don't know if you've seen like graphic audio books where they kind of bring that stuff to life, but it's different. It's not quite the same as that, because it's almost like a movie in your mind, but like not like I don't know, because it
It
feels really
feels
real. Like it
real.
feels
It feels
real, and
real.
and and like Akatar graphic audio, it's like okay, they have voice actors and stuff, they have sound
Yeah,
effects, but it doesn't feel a real like that's like a realistic thing like yours does, and it's like almost like bringing back like a radio show meets like books and
yeah,
fantasy world. It's
yeah,
super unique, I think, and like I
I
really
don't think
think you
anyone else has
guys.
done this. And it's almost like you're listening to, I'm looking at it as when I started it, I was like, okay, so it's going to be kind of like an audiobook. It's so different than an audiobook, but
right,
it scratches the same itch an
yeah,
audiobook would scratch,
yeah,
but it's its own separate thing where I really do feel like I'm like, I could meet Lucy on the street. I could meet
yeah,
James on the street and I would be like, okay, like they feel like real people to me. And this story feels like someone who's really going through all these things. So just to give everyone an idea, so Black Velvet Fairies again. He had James, yeah, James, her best friend. He's the one. Does he fall in love with Lucy? TMI
Uh,
alert.
You're trying to
I
get
mean,
all the spoilers.
Because his
well, I
friend
mean,
said, "Oh yeah, yeah,
yeah,
he's talked
I
about you."
yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that yeah,
Uh,
James has a
it's
thing
crush.
for Lucy that
Okay,
is that isn't really
requited.
reciprocal. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
fine. I kind of figured, but okay.
yeah.
Anyway,
That's
so
awesome. That's awesome that you picked it up because we're keeping it pretty subtle.
yeah,
Um, but
I'm
yeah,
telling you,
yeah.
I was
We dive deep.
invested.
We dive deep into things like on
Yeah.
this podcast. So
I
Taylor's like probably looking for all the things.
I can't tell you how happy your response is making me because it's like exactly what we want. It's exactly what we
Oh.
want people to take away from it. You know, that it feels real, feels connected to the world, that they feel like real people, that they have relationships that aren't centered on the fairies, which to me is what's going to make as the because it's just going to get more and more fairy,
hmm
right? You haven't even scratched the surface of the fairy part
Okay,
yet.
that's
It's going
fine.
to get more. It's going to get more and more fairy. I will say. I'll also say that fairy rings will be very directly connected
Ooh.
at some point. Have you been to the website?
I have
Oh
not. So
no,
I
you
was
haven't. Okay, you haven't. No, no, wait. Okay, because
okay,
so
okay,
in the so in the
okay.
so in the so in the story, right? She's like telling her story, and she doesn't think there's going to be much to it, right? And then
hmm
as it keeps going, in episode 4, she's like, "Well, I'm going to start a website."
Yes, and
So
then she starts putting it on online and everything.
right,
So
so you can go to blackvelvetfairies.com right now and see you can see the paintings.
I looked
Why
up
is this
Black
so
Velvet Fair,
immersive? This is so
right? It's so immersive. I looked up blackvelvetfairies.com because again, I'm crazy and I was like, is this really real? Like am I like like I was having all sorts of questions because just to tell the viewers what they have done with this podcast is you feel like you're listening to a podcast like Valerie and I. We're having a whole conversation. We're talking to you, but we're talking to you about this girl's experience that she has with these paintings. And she has these paintings that are kind of making her feel a certain way. She's having weird things happen to her. She's, recording things and you're listening to it live on the podcast. And they have these like special guests on the podcast. One is like a paranormal researcher, and he does this whole big thing with like EVPs.
Yep.
And he goes through and really explains it and breaks down. And he said, truthfully, I mean, at the end of the day, this is what had me tripping because my house is haunted. And he was like, what's the difference between fairies and ghosts and spirits and demons and you think you're interacting with? Because a lot of the things that people think they're interacting with aliens or they think they're interacting with ghosts or demons, if you trace it back to ancient history and all this kind of stuff, that's what fairies used to do to people. And then I'm over
Right.
here thinking the guy that died in my house before we bought it, I've been
So,
thinking that's the ghost haunting my house. And then again, I'm outside. This was like one of the first episodes, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my gosh, as I'm gardening, planting all these pretty flowers, and
of
I'm
course.
sitting there like, is there really a fairy like messing around with my house? Should I be planting these flowers? Is this inviting them? Like these are the thoughts. And people are probably going to think I'm crazy, but
I
this was
love
my
it.
inner
But listen to the
monologue.
show and you'll get it.
This
Yeah.
was my inner monologue literally going through. And then at the end of the episode, because at this point I was like, okay, maybe this isn't really real. It feels really real. But at the end of the episode, they call out these special guests and the fact that he is a real paranormal investigator. And they
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
the same thing over and over with all these special guests. Like you had someone who was like an art history person who like
A black velvet painter. Yeah.
no, yeah, the Black Velvet Painter, but then also music history. Sorry, music history, and they had like a
Oh
about
right. Yeah.
the song they
Oh,
had,
you've
and
already made it. You've already made it to the song. Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
done. Everything that's available, I've listened to it all.
Oh
I
wow.
am,
she,
Okay.
I am
she's a
Okay.
in
super
it.
fan now.
You've made it
Yeah,
to the song. Okay. You've made it to the song. I love the song, by the way.
yeah. Oh, I
Uh,
was
Oh
listening
God.
to the song hardcore, and I was like, uh huh. Heard the word
yeah.
portal there. Heard the word girl that transfers to the portal. Heard this, and I was like, I was taking all the notes. I'm not going to say
Yeah.
anything in
Yeah.
this
And
episode in case.
there's more stuff to come, including some stuff that's like really physically in the world. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but there is some interactivity later in the show where it's real locations and real stuff from the story are in these physical locations in the real
That's
world.
so cool. So yeah, I think to me
Oh
that
my
was the
gosh.
coolest part is at the end of every episode you call out these people and then again, I'm crazy and I had to look these people up and I'm like they're really real, like the professions that they're
So did you go
speaking
to the
on.
that website? Did you find the website,
The
Tay, or
Black
no?
Velvet, no, I didn't apply in Black Velvet Fairies and then afterwards she was like when you go to emeraldanvil.com and I was like am I an idiot because it's probably what she's been saying at the end of every single episode. Like for more information on this go to emeraldanvil.com and I'm like, "Oh my god, Taylor, because I was looking up Black Velvet Fairies and I found I'm not sure if I found the right website, but I found something and that's where I found the actress's name and then realizing that she was the voice for Lucy and that's my only indication that I was like this is not really real
Right,
because
right,
I
yeah,
was so confused but I was so in it and I was like oh this is cool and it had my mind going and I was looking up some of the actual like special I guess like specialists that you have on the show and
uh-huh.
I was like oh I gotta look up I want to look back into that because it
Taylor's your
had me
biggest fan now.
sorry yeah I'm, I'm more freaking
Black
out
Velvet
like
Fairies fan
Kind
club
of
over
lost
here.
you.
I love it.
I'm over
Wait,
here
I
more
lost you. I lost you
oh I'm
for a
sorry
second.
I'm so intrigued by all of this and this is like kind of right up my alley and I just think it's so cool and I think it's such a cool added touch to add real specialists because the way they were speaking and which
Yeah,
also threw me off they sounded so like professional like they were really having these
yeah,
conversations it didn't sound
yeah, yeah.
scripted whatsoever.
Because it wasn't scripted. Gretchen in the role of Lucy, we just gave her questions and she interviewed them, and the
Oh.
and everybody in the show, all the experts, they know what
Hmm.
we're doing. We weren't fooling anybody. Everything that they say is true.
That's so
Like
cool.
in terms of like, so you made it to the one with Heather from Magic in the USA, the witch.
Yes.
She's a practicing witch because there's some crossover between fae stuff and witchcraft or and the
Hmm.
occult that we wanted to explore. Um, you know, her, Greg, the Juanita, the Black Velvet Painter. There's some other experts later. Brian Dunning from the show called Skeptoid, which is amazing.
That was so
Um,
cool.
yeah. Oh,
That
so
was
you've listened to that one too?
yes
Oh,
because
cool. Yeah.
yes I
I love the Brian from Skeptoid. He he is his podcast 900 something episodes. He's been doing it for
since
forever.
2006
Yeah.
because that's what
Wow.
he said.
Taylor.
Sorry.
I love this so much.
His whole thing is like looking at, paranormal stuff or supernatural stuff or whatever. And then he's not trying to debunk it. He's
Mm-mm.
exploring it and saying, here's what it really is, or here's what it probably is, right? That's his whole website. So when we were like, man, is he going to play along? So when we reached out to him, he's like, yeah, off of my show, I'm totally down. So he was super excited to like, he invented a lot of the stuff,
Did he?
right? We just kind of we gave him some direction, but he just riffed. And so for a guy who's like a professional skeptic to like totally let himself be absorbed into the world, I was so happy about. And his stuff, there's
Wow.
actually things that he says, which probably pretty clear the stuff that's made up, maybe not. There's some of the stuff that he's saying that's completely made up, that's completely connected to our world, that
Yeah.
really pays off later with I'll just say this, with
Wow.
more paintings and more visual stuff from different places in the world.
I think I have an idea. I think his dreams, the dream he
Yep,
had, that yep,
yep,
okay. Cool,
yep,
cool,
yep.
cool.
And
Again,
dreams are
I don't want to
and
give
dreams.
spoilers
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I want people to listen to this. I don't want to spoil anything for them as they're going through, but I also feel like I'm having like a little moment because again, I told you I listened to all of these. I really enjoy it. I'm all excited about it. And I have so many questions I want to ask you, but I have to remember I'm like, Taylor, we have to be mindful because people are going to listen to
I
this.
haven't finished it yet.
Yeah, so I have to. I don't want anything
But I'm
spoiled.
so
So,
excited.
oh, I'm so excited, Greg. I would be picking
Well, and
your
I want to
Yes.
brain.
send you guys. I want to send you guys the novel.
Okay,
Um,
Please.
yes,
yeah, because do you guys read on a Kindle or
I have
e-reader?
yeah, I have a Kindle.
I
Um,
Yeah.
mean,
I can send you I'll send you the ebook after we get done. I'll send you, and I would love for you guys to be advanced readers and see I mean, hopefully you like it. I'm super nervous about the novel because, um, I co-wrote the novel. Actually, the way we wrote the novel was super cool. So, like I said, the novel is a 14-year-old kid, primarily 14-year-old girl, Morgan De Leon, and her brother Orion getting teleported to Hada. Um, they are Cuban American because
Okay.
my partner, Eduardo Sanchez, that sounds a little Cuban. He's he's Cuban American, so I've known his kids like literally since the day of their birth because my wife
Oh.
helped deliver at least Bianca. Um,
Oh.
That's and you
so
guys are
so
best friends since film school, correct?
we have been friends since film school. We're still partners. Our families are all super close. Um,
That's amazing.
so so when we decided, because Ed helped co-create the world with me, we knew we wanted to explore it through kids. Kind of began as like really more my kids, and then we started thinking, well, man, but the whole reason it's called Hada. Hada is Spanish for fairy,
Scarf? Oh, yeah, fairy. Yeah.
for fairy.
Fairy. No,
The
because there was
scarf.
something when you looked up the word hada in the first episode, it said scarf.
Oh, right.
She was like looking it up and it was something
There's a
like
bunch of
scarf
yeah,
and hada
right,
means fairy in yeah,
in
but I was like
Spanish.
weird because she picked up her grandmother's scarf.
Scarf.
Oh.
Yes. Oh, so
Yeah,
you're
and she
getting all
picked up her
sorts of. You're
grandma's
getting all.
scarf.
The scarf ends up being important. I'll say that.
Oh, the
Um,
Okay.
so
details.
so when Ed told me that the word for the Spanish word for fairy was hada, there was something about that word that just it felt like immediately felt like a place.
Hmm.
Like it
Yeah.
felt it like it. So I was like, well, maybe what if the word for fairy in Spanish came from interacting with this place called Hada, right? And then we were like, well, so maybe the whole thing could have like a little Hispanic vibe to it, Latino, Latina, whatever
Yeah.
term
Yeah.
you want to use. So we made Morgan and Orion De Leon, another Spanish last name. We're like, okay, let's kind of base it on an amalgam of my kids and Ed's kids. But as a 58-year-old white dude, I was like, I'm not totally the novel's written in the first person. And I'm like, I'm not entirely qualified to write as a 14-year-old Hispanic girl. But I know somebody who is, and that's Bianca, Ed's daughter, who's 22 now. And she's a very good writer, very good artist. I've known her forever. So I reached out to her and I'm like, would you help me write this novel? And she's like, well, sure. And this is the way we did it. So the way we wrote the novel was really almost like a role playing game. So
Okay.
I'm a huge Dungeons and Dragons fan. Grew up playing Dungeons and Dragons. And so the way we wrote the first draft of the novel is I pre-wrote a lot of stuff about the world, settings and characters and situations that I kind of knew was going to happen. And then Bianca and I got on a because she lives in Maryland, I live in Portland, Oregon.
We're
Wait,
in
I'm in
Maryland.
Maryland.
Yeah, they live in Urbana or Frederick, basically.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
I
not
know
terribly
exactly where that is.
far.
Yeah,
Wow, that's so weird.
yeah, they
Small
basically
world.
live in Frederick. And so we got on a Google Doc together, and I would say, "Here's what happens. What does Morgan do?" And she would just write out what Morgan did or what Morgan said, and I would say, "And then this happens." So we built the first draft of the novel just going back and forth like a role playing game, and
That's so
she would
cool.
surprise me and do things that I was not expecting to happen, and I would have to like adjust and be like, "Oh, I wasn't expecting them to do that. Let me change it and adjust it." So the first draft of the novel is really like a role playing game with Bianca Sanchez playing the role of Morgan De Leon. So what Morgan does, almost all of what Morgan does, and almost all of what she actually says is really straight from Bianca, and then everything else is,
Wow.
I'm filling in the gaps, and I'm making up all the fantasy stuff, all
Hmm.
the Hadin stuff, and everything. Obviously, that's coming from me because Morgan doesn't know anything, right? So it's kind
Yeah,
of perfect.
Right.
it is
Morgan is
perfect.
learning. Morgan is learning as I'm giving her information. So that's the way we wrote the first draft of the novel. Uh, Bianca did a fantastic job with that, but I'm very very nervous about it because that's the thing that I'm like most creatively directly connected to. And I've never written a novel before. I've written a ton of screenplays, but no novels. So I'm kind of nervous. So hopefully you guys like it.
Yeah, send it our way. I love reading. I have a Kindle and everything, and I'm a
I
big
will send it
reader.
right after. I'll send it to you guys right after I'm done. Actually, I think I might only have Valerie's.
Oh, we
Uh,
have Whimsy Gossip, so
okay,
Taylor has access to the. We both have access to the email. I just usually typically respond to like the
okay,
I
cool,
business
think
thing.
cool.
doesn't it have
I'll
to go
send
to
it to you right after
my
this,
email that I
and
use
I
for
would,
my
and
Kindle
hopefully you
though?
like it.
Does
But
it?
I would love
She
to know
doesn't.
what
I don't
Sure, I
know.
don't know.
love to know what you think.
I
We'll figure it
will.
out.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, but I'll sort it. Yeah, I'm excited because
Cool.
again, I'm super excited to see the worlds kind of mesh. And that's always super fun. So, like we were talking about earlier, we're big fans of like ACOTAR, the Court of Thorns and Roses world. And right now, Sarah J. Maas has like 16 books or 17 books, and the
Wow.
worlds are now colliding in this last book. So you have to
Oh
read
wow.
all the books to get
It's
to
the
where it all
mass verse, literally
collides.
the mass verse.
Yeah, it's a
Wow.
universe within itself. So we're getting to that point where things are starting to collide and characters are starting to meet together, and it is like
Oh
that feeling like there's no better. It's kind of like the Avengers Endgame, you know, when everyone starts going
yeah.
through the portals and you're like yes, and you're championing. So I love that stuff when you
Oh
have
cool.
two different worlds come like kind of coming together. So I'm excited to one, keep listening to the podcast, and two, then to read the book and kind of see where all the things are piecing together. Because I'm a big like I pick up on all like little details and I love to like take note of them and then just
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and then
like
we
to
like to
make
predict and make
predictions.
theories
Yes.
and theorize what's gonna happen next. Like that's a lot of things that we do like on our podcast is when we read these books, like
Yeah.
we're like, okay, so like what's gonna happen
What's
next? And
gonna
like
happen?
what are the craziest wild theories about these characters out there?
Where I
And it gets
can't.
everyone really excited.
I can't. Man. And we're doing a promotional swap with them. So you figure I would remember. It's a podcast. They did Harry Potter first, and then they did the Percy Jackson things, where it's like a guy that's never read the Harry Potter books, and he reads the Harry Potter books, and he guesses what's going to
Yes.
happen. Shoot, what's it called? Potterless.
It's like Potterless because yeah.
Potterless.
They
Yeah,
promoted in the first a couple of the episodes of
yeah, yeah.
Black
Of
Velvet.
the
Yep.
Velvet Fairies. Yeah, yeah. And fantasy fangirls too.
Love
Which
them. We
didn't you guys
Yeah,
just
those
just?
had
are
them on.
we just had them on, yeah.
Yeah, we're
We
doing
love them.
and it's through PRX. I don't know if the fantasy fangirls are aware of our existence or not, but we did a promo swap with them through PRX. They're
Oh,
No,
great.
really?
They're
they do know about you guys
Yeah.
because when you guys reached out, I saw that they were on your ad, and so I immediately because we're friends with them, and I was like, "Who are these people? Is this a real thing?" Because like I've never heard of this before, and so then they were like, "Yeah, no, totally," you know. So I was like,
Yeah.
"Cool, okay,
They're
these
so
are
great.
sweet.
legit. This is a legit
Yeah,
thing."
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's
So
part of
yeah,
the thing, right? Is like there's so much out there, right? So much content and so
yeah,
many people doing anything, and it's like, how do you know what's legit and what's good or whatever? And this is
right,
why podcasts like your guys is so valuable, right? Help people sort through all that stuff.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
I'm so excited. I'm probably gonna make a TikTok after this about Black Velvet Fairies because
You should,
I
yes.
just need people to like I would need more people to talk to about it, truthfully. I need more
I'm
people
Well,
to
literally
okay,
gonna
chat.
binge it. Like I'm gonna. It's. I
yeah,
mean, I've got through episode 1, so I'm gonna finish it, and then so we can talk about it today.
yeah, and it's
Yeah.
only going to get from a fantasy perspective, like from a fantasy fan perspective, it only gets better for fantasy fans
Yes.
because obviously we start
Okay.
out and it's a little bit of fantasy, and the
Yeah,
deeper we
yeah.
go, the
Mhm.
more fantastic it's gonna get.
So I
Yeah.
did want to also like touch on a little bit about like your whole like Blair Witch Project
Yeah,
journey and stuff like that because I
yeah,
feel like we'd be amiss not to mention it.
sure,
Obviously, like so Taylor and I are both 90s kids. And I know like that film is like
Iconic.
so beloved and so iconic like and even to this day like people reference it all the time and
yeah,
I
yeah,
feel like in that film like you kind of had that like perspective like this realism right going on too with like the cameras and like how it was filmed and wasn't it also filmed in Maryland, is that
yeah,
right or no?
yeah, yeah. Seneca
I
Creek
don't
State Park, which is
it was
close
filmed
to
in Maryland?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's Seneca Creek. It's a state park. You can go to it. Seneca Creek State Park, which is kind of close to Ed and Steph lived in Germantown. and it's kind of close to there.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, so
That's
almost
so
all of it's in
wild.
Seneca Creek. We, we shot in Burkittsville, which is a real town there. That's the town, and then we did have to move the kids, the actors, to another Patapsco State
Yeah,
Park.
Patapsco?
Pataska State Park. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
used to be the house at the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's not there anymore. It hasn't been there for forever. But that was just an abandoned house that somebody on the crew found, uh,
wow.
and we lucked out, and the state gave us permission to
That's crazy.
shoot in it. That used to be in Patapsco. Is it Seneca
Patapsco.
Creek State
And
Park?
I know where it's yeah, I mean
I think it's Patapsco.
Yeah,
Patapsco. It's
Yeah.
Patasco, yeah.
Something like that.
pretty
I
close.
definitely have been there. I've been like on like I think a
That's
trail
wild.
at that park
Yeah,
before, but
I think I think Seneca Creek is more like is it Seneca Creek or just Seneca State Park? I can't remember. But Patapsco is like kind of wild. There's not
Mm-hmm.
really much there. It's more like a nature preserve more than like a park.
yeah.
That's great. So
But
when
anyway,
you
yeah. So
filmed
Maryland,
Blair
super
Witch,
super connected.
yeah, when you filmed Blair Witch, did you have any idea that it was going to be what it was going to be?
No, hell no. No, I mean, we shot that movie. We shot what became the entire movie for $22,000. Um,
Wow.
we ended up
Wow.
we ended up spending more than that on stuff later, and then when we got into Sundance, we had to spend a lot more because
Mm-hmm.
back then we were actually the last year that if you were in Sundance, you had to have a physical film print. They weren't projecting video.
Oh.
And
Oh.
it cost us, I think, we shot the movie for $22,000, and we got into Sundance. That's when we actually had to raise money because we cost us $40,000 just to transfer the video to film, right?
Oh
Um,
my gosh.
but so we made it for uh, $22,000. I forget what my point was going to be. What were we talking about?
Did you expect it? No, no.
That's
Did you
that's
expect it to be
crazy
as
though.
big? Like that's.
I was
I'm
gonna make a
shocked.
point. I was gonna make a point, and then
You're
I
That's
fine.
okay.
totally lost
No, I was
my.
just wondering, like, if you said you didn't expect it to be as
Oh,
big
right.
as
So
yeah.
yeah, so this is like so low budget. We didn't even know if we were gonna finish it, right? Like, much less it be successful. So it was like, wow, we actually finished the movie, and then we got into Sundance. I'm like, oh my god, I can't believe we got into Sundance. This is
Mm-hmm.
crazy. And so really every step of the way was just like one unexpected. So did we expect it to be what it was? No, not even an inkling, because then we got into Sundance, we sold it at Sundance, we got into Cannes, we were at the Cannes Film
Oh
Festival.
my
We actually won an
gosh.
award at Cannes, which like most people in America don't know. Then the movie came out and it was all
Yeah.
crazy successful and everything, and
Yeah.
really
It's
every step of the
scary. I remember being like I mean, I was really young when that came out. I mean, it
yeah
came out in 1999 and I feel like by the time like I got around to watching it, like I just remember being scared. Just
yeah
like, cuz I was like maybe like 6 or 7 watching that movie.
oh
Yeah.
no, that's too early. That's too early. That's too
Yeah.
early.
Yeah, well, I probably was watching a lot of stuff way
I
too
feel
early.
like also you guys inspired like paranormal activity, in my opinion. So when
Thanks.
I
Yeah,
saw paranormal activity, those movies, I was like, this is funny. This is kind of similar vibes
Like the
to
type of shooting was
yeah.
really unique, I feel like for that time period as well. Like and I feel like that's something that you're doing again like now with this podcast. It's another very unique style
yeah,
of storytelling like
It breaks
just
the
to where
fourth
like Blair
wall
Witch made you
almost.
feel like that was real and that was like you were with these people along this
Hmm.
journey and this is the same thing like not the same thing but it's very similar vibes and I think it works though like just like
yeah.
that worked back then like this is something that will work today.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. That's what we want. I mean, we love the idea of like get you into the story in a through a door that feels like a real door, and then eventually when you find yourself in this fairy world, you're like, oh, I see. I could follow this journey of Morgan because that's really what the novel's called Journey to Hada, so it's no big surprise that they get teleported to Hada. But hopefully, people kind of have the same feeling that you're talking about of realism and be like, oh my gosh, well, kind of like Harry Potter,
Yeah.
a little bit. Um, obviously Harry Potter's the holy grail of all fantasy, young, especially
Yeah.
like any. I don't even consider Harry Potter young adult.
No.
I just think it's fantasy
It's timeless.
young people happen to like, but um,
Yeah.
but
It's it
to me, it's like the holy grail of like how a world gets explored, and obviously how much
yeah.
people love it. But I think that we have, and I love Harry Potter, and uh, really like in every way. But I will say with Harry Potter, one of the things that I get hung up on a little bit with Harry Potter is that there is supposed to be this tangible connection to the real world, right? He
Mhm.
lives in London and he goes and gets on a train in London and goes to Hogwarts.
Yeah.
But other than that, there's really the two worlds don't mix, and it kind of
Mm.
doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like all these things are happening in the world, and Muggles don't perceive any of it,
Yeah.
or the wizards aren't like. There's just like so much of it, and it's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah, yeah. It's
It
very
doesn't,
separated.
it
Yeah.
doesn't need to make sense, right? It doesn't need to make sense.
I
But
believe.
what we're trying to do a little bit in Emerald Anvil is okay, there's fairies and there's all this stuff that feels very magical, but we're trying to set it up in a way it's like, oh yeah, that could happen.
Mhm.
That touches our world. And then when the kids get to Hada, yes, it's this fantastical setting and it feels like a fantasy setting, but lots of things happen to the kids. They're like, oh, this is a fucking this. Oh, excuse me.
You're
You're
This is
good.
fine.
this is a real world, right? The fairies, the Hadin, are just like humans in terms of they have the capacity to be good and they have the capacity to be evil. And they have their own agendas and their own things that they want to get done. And some are willing to
yeah.
do really terrible things to children to see that through. And the kids come from middle class upbringing in Portland, Oregon, and suddenly they're in this world where they're in the center of this really epic life or death
Situation.
struggle. and
Situation.
and
Yeah.
we're trying to get across this idea of like that sinking in, that oh shit, I'm in the middle of this really dangerous thing all of a sudden, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
I better figure it out. Right, so
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's both Morgan and Orion's challenge, right? Is like, I better figure this world out quick, because if I don't, I'm probably
You're toast.
be dead.
Not
yeah.
gonna make it. Yeah.
Unalived real quick.
I'm gonna be unalived.
Yeah. Really fast.
wow.
Okay, so that's cool. So you said the end of the first season of the podcast, and then the first book.
The
Will I go to connect the dots, or is it
They connect, yeah, yeah, yeah.
okay?
But
Cool.
kind of earlyish in the book, earlier in the book than in the podcast. There's still a lot of book after, because clearly they intersect on Earth, right?
Yeah.
And then and then
Oh.
the kids aren't on Earth anymore. The kids, most of the novel, the kids are on Hada.
Yeah.
It's called Journey to Hada. So
So, huh? I have so many
Interesting.
questions.
Do the fairies have extra long lives?
nope,
Do they live longer than humans? No?
nope. The only okay, here, physiologically, and all this stuff is actually, or a lot of this stuff is on emeraldanvil.com.
Okay.
Okay.
We have a universe section, which is just like big picture um mythology that's not really
Mm-hmm.
story specific. It's just like, here's the planet and here's these things about the planet, blah blah blah. And the Hadin don't eat. They don't have to eat. They don't have to ingest food, because the
Oh.
glim uh, is, to them it's not magic. To them it's just a source of energy. It's like a plant photosynthesizing sunlight. That's not that to
Gotcha.
us. That's
Gotcha.
magical because we can't do it, but to a plant, that's
Yeah.
just what we do, right? Um,
Oh, okay.
the Hadin are the same way. The glim is flowing through them constantly. The glim is like always flowing through their bodies. Again, they figured out all these different ways of doing it, making wings, making blades. There's all sorts of stuff that they can do with it. We get into that, which to us is all feels like stuff that's magical. To them, it's not. The other thing that it does is it just
Gotcha.
provides them the basic, what would for us be caloric energy. They don't need it because they just have this energy flowing through them. So they drink water or beer. They get drunk or whatever. One of the characters is a drunk. One of the Hakim is a drunk. Or he drinks. But they have this thing called Seyo, and this one of the only things that all of them do, and they all call it the same thing called Seyo, and it's they carry around like a little packet of herbs and stuff, and then they all have these cups that are fit to their hands, and they can put water and put the herbs in it, and then they use the glim to kind of heat it up, and it cooks it and makes it like into a little broth for like minerals and things, and they all drink that, and that's the
Can the
only
kids drink it?
it's fine for the kids, but the kids don't. Well, there's
Is that a spoiler?
you're gonna see like okay. Look, it's fantasy 101. I'm not inventing anything new. Clearly, the kids are gonna have powers on Hada, right? I mean,
Okay.
if they didn't have powers, it wouldn't be much of a
A
wouldn't be
story.
much of a story if they didn't have powers.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then we explain why they have powers, but their powers aren't exactly like the Hadin.
Okay. Okay.
And so they've got this whole journey of like uh
The Hadin probably don't like that. I can just imagine that they're probably not the
well,
biggest
okay,
fans.
but okay. Well, here's the thing. Humans and the Hadin have been interacting for thousands of years. And this is all on the website. Um at one point, and it's a whole planet, right? So there's 2 billion Hadin on this planet, right?
Wow.
And at one point, there were like 400,000 humans living on Hada, most
Oh.
of whom had never been to Earth, had never seen Earth. To some of them, Earth was just mythological because they had been there for 50 generations, right? Some distant relative of theirs, the Hadin, had brought them to Hada, and they just stayed and married another human and had kids, and then their kids stayed, and they've never
Wow.
been back to Earth, and have no interest in going back to Earth. But then 150 years ago, this terrible, terrible thing called the Reaving happened that a human caused, and it caused like this genocidal war that lasted 100 years called the Portal War. So the kids are kind of coming into the aftermath of that. So there used to be like 40 million humans on Hada. Now there's about 400,000 total on the entire planet. And
Wow.
most
Wow.
of them are just in a couple of places, a couple of dominions that still protect humans, right? So of course you've got the big evil
Oh.
empire, right? Pydos,
Ooh.
who just wants to kill all the humans, and you've got a couple of dominions that are keeping that from happening. But then when the kids show up, it just kicks it off, right? It's like
Wow.
the empire, the holy empire of Pydos, is like that's the sign, right? It's like in their Bible that when those kids arrive, it's time to end it, right?
Oh
And
boy.
then other
Oh.
religions are like, when the girl arrives, it's time to save them, right? That's the kind of like all these
Interesting.
different religions, that all these different Hadin have different interpretations of what does it mean when these kids arrive. And actually only one religion anticipates a girl arriving. All the other religions think it's only going to be a boy.
Wow.
One
How long
religion.
does it take you to build this like world?
This
Like
is
Well,
insane.
how
Cupid's 18, and it started when they were 6, so 12 years.
wow.
And a lot of that is just like rattling around in my head and it being very different. But yeah, I mean, a while.
World building is a lot of work,
It was a
because
lot of work, but
you have to
fun. I
fill
mean,
all the
as a Dungeon and Dragons kid,
Yeah.
Star Wars kid. I mean, Ed and I talk about this all the time. Um, like when we made Blair Witch, right? Like we knew we wanted to make the movie, but then we had like the backstory. I don't know if you guys have like been on the website or any of this stuff. Like we have all these stories of Ellie Kedward and Rustin Parr and the history of all this other stuff with the witch that happened for 100 something years, 200, 300 something years before what happened in the movie happened, right? And we wrote all that stuff when we were creating the stuff that went into the movie. And we're like, oh, and Ed could actually make websites back in the day. So we're like, oh, well, let's put that story out there. and that became part of the marketing, but we weren't looking at it as marketing. Because we're Star Wars kids.
Yeah.
To me, even when I was a kid, when I saw Star Wars, I never thought about Star Wars just as the movie, because it was the movie and the comic books and the
The book.
albums and
Yeah.
the action figures. Everything to me was like, it's just Star Wars, right? It's one big world,
Yeah.
and there's a movie, and then there's other ways that. So I just grew up thinking about stories that way, and that's kind of what Dungeons and Dragons is too. Dungeons and Dragons is all world building, is
Yeah.
creating a world, and then how do I make it interesting for my friends to want to interact with that world. So between Star Wars and Dungeons and Dragons, like, Emerald Anvil is just like my geek self, like, loving every second of it. It's a lot of work, and I'm super nervous about it being out in the world right now, but the
Yeah.
creating the stuff is like, just a
Fun
joy
stuff.
for me.
So
I feel
don't
like
be
whenever you put
nervous.
yeah, but I feel
Yeah,
like
don't be
whenever
nervous
you're a
because it's great.
creator though, yeah, but whenever you're a creator putting yourself out there like that, it's nerve-wracking. Like
Yeah, it's nerve-wracking.
even for us, like, I mean, gosh, like when we had our premiere of our little like film, like Taylor and I were like white knuckle like holding each other, like, are they gonna like it? Is everyone gonna like it? And everyone
I
claps at
couldn't
the end. You're like,
watch.
ooh, I can breathe. Like,
I was
Yeah,
like
and the
this the entire
reception.
time, like literally in the seat. Because I can't watch myself on screen. It just weirds me out. And I was
yeah,
literally sitting next to Valerie, like white knuckling with this hand, like this. Like I just can't watch. And I could hear it. And I was so nervous because at that point I hadn't acted or been in front of a screen in like 8 years. And I was like, do I even know
wow,
how to do this anymore? And I was like, I don't even know. And our
Yeah.
main actor Resand was phenomenal and he just kind of carried this thing, thank God. Um,
Yeah.
but
But even
we
for us too, like it's like we did something that was already so like beloved as well. And it's like,
mm,
book to movie adaptations, people can be really, really picky.
mean.
So
holy moly,
we yeah, and to have we've had like 99% positive reception on that film, which is like insane
Yeah.
for the internet.
yeah,
But
yeah,
like we still were
same
just
for Hollywood.
terrified about
Yeah,
the
yeah,
reception.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, I can, yes, because clearly Akator has a
Akatar, yeah.
passionate fans, clearly.
Yes, my favorite comment though that I think we'll ever get is when people are like, "This is exactly how I imagined it in my head," and I'm
Wow,
just like, and we've gotten so many of them that I am just like, that is the top tier comment for me.
wow, yeah,
So
yeah, that's amazing.
that's
That's got to feel really good.
that's a that's
But
I'm
it's like
like,
when
okay.
fans are doing something, that's like I think the difference sometimes, and people like they see that and appreciate that. Like a lot of people, we have had comments of like, "Oh man, like because Hulu has the rights to produce the actual
Yeah,
show,"
yeah,
and people a lot of comments times are like, "Oh man, like Hulu, oh like I don't even you guys are better than them. You're gonna do better, whatever." And I think it's because people are fearful because sometimes Hollywood can take and they just make it this big blockbuster thing and they forget the fandom, or they don't really check in with like what the fans are really wanting,
Yeah.
and they kind of just make their own changes and decisions that I think like even go off of like what the author even wants sometimes. So
yeah,
people are kind of traumatized by that, and so that's
People
like
are
yeah,
kind of the
upset
beauty
like,
of fan films. But
yeah, yeah. No,
cuz
I love what you guys are doing as
oh,
fans. I think it's super cool that you're kind of kind of blending the two worlds. You're a fan, but you're also a participant in the world. I think that's great.
oh, that's
I
a
mean,
yeah,
good
I
we
way to
used
really
look
want to
at
bring
it.
it to life. We want to bring like the books, we want to bring it out of their people's heads and like to life in like the most doing the books as much justice as possible. Like that's really like the goal.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to
yeah.
make
She ever
movies.
reached out to you guys? Has she reached out to you guys, Sarah Mass?
No.
No.
No. Which honestly I'm like, I don't know if that's a blessing or not, because I'm like, oh, I don't want her to like, what if she doesn't like it, or
I'm
try
nervous.
to like
She has to like it. Has to. I mean, if you don't like your fan, you don't like your fan stuff. I mean, come on. She should be thrilled. She probably is. She's aware of it. I'm sure she's thrilled because it's got to still. I mean, I know that she's uber famous and these novels are uber
yeah.
successful. But it's still got to be satisfying to have people celebrating your work and putting that amount of love and effort into it. It's got to feel good, no matter how
Yeah.
big you get.
If she ever, I mean, that would be obviously the greatest honor to us in the world if she ever did see chapter 54. We found out that she liked it. Like that would be so amazing. But
I
yeah,
would
I mean,
hang up my hat at that point. I would be like, and thank you very
and
much.
and
That is
scene.
see
done.
and see, and she
Yeah.
seems cool. I mean, from like the interviews and stuff that I've seen with her, like she seems like a legit geek. I know that she's a big
Oh
Star
yeah.
Wars fan. You know,
Yeah.
I love that. I love
She's
that.
like,
Do you
and
have any? Oh, sorry,
oh, go ahead,
Taylor.
Val. You're good. You're
No, I
good.
was just gonna say, like, while we have you, like, do you have any like advice for us as people trying to kind of get in, like, into this creator film space?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the fan film thing is amazing, and I think that there's a lot that you can do with that. I would think, ultimately, just as creators, I would start thinking about how do you tell your own stories, because you guys have got a great aesthetic. You guys could do
Oh,
fairy stuff all day long with your own with your own fairy stories.
Greg,
You
that is
know, and
so funny you say that because when I was in high school, I don't even know if this is gonna go in the podcast, but between all of us, maybe it'll
It
make it
can
the
go.
podcast. I don't know. But when I was in high school, I have like a 500-page novel document on my thing that I have written years ago about like the Fae, and
I
it's
didn't even know
called,
about this.
yeah, no, it's been on my thing, and I've, I told my husband about it, and he was kind of like pushing me, like, you really should get into like, and I opened it back up because again, I was in high school like a decade ago, and I was reading it, and I was like,
yeah,
oh, this is so poorly written, but it's essentially there, but it's all called like tethered, and it's about, I've genuinely been like thinking, my brain has been racking, like, do I touch this? Do I do it justice and finish it? And it's all based on fairies and like the Irish mythology because my family is like Syrian and Irish. So yeah, funny you said that. But
yeah,
anyway,
yeah,
that
Yeah,
was
because Taylor, you know what? We could make money off of that. We can't make money off of Sarah's stuff.
yeah, yeah. I mean, like short form.
Like
You
that's
know,
the thing that does suck about fan films is like it's all has to be nonprofit. It all has to be very carefully done,
yeah.
right? There's a lot of things we have to make sure that we don't step on toes and things like that. So that's the challenge of it. So that it is kind of more fun, I think, or not more fun, but it would be fun to branch into something kind of, of our own kind of or somebody else's, creation that we can kind of
okay, read Journey to Hada, and see if any off or black. I tell you what, here's the thing.
Black Velvet Fairies seems much more
Black Velvet
predictable.
Fairies, right? Black
Yeah.
Velvet Fairies, you guys could do a low budget spinoff, and we could work it out so that it would be official. So
Oh my
I
gosh.
mean, that's the kind of stuff that we're hoping happens.
Greg,
So
don't get my brain going because Valerie will kill me right now because
no,
my brain's been in fan film
I know
mode.
she's like, "So can we do this scene and this?" I was like, "Taylor, we have a giant thing coming up in
yeah, get,
September."
get chapter 70. What is it?
Yeah, just
It's a
chapter
chapter 70
70.
project.
Yeah.
Chapter
Yeah.
70. Get chapter 70 done.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then think about, ooh, is there a Black Velvet Fairies
Angle
spinoff?
to this. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
as you
Definitely.
keep going, you'll see that because it's not only Lucy who is having these kinds of experiences. Just say that, right?
Mm.
Anybody, not anybody, but there are other individuals around the world, and you're going to meet some of them in the
I'm
podcast
so excited to dive
who are
deeper into
having
this
similar
podcast.
My
experiences.
brain has been going since the moment we started talking. I'm like, one, you need to talk to our friend Connor Padilla. Like, he is amazing. He's a big D&D guy. I think he would eat this. I'm literally going to recommend this to him when we get off here. Connor is amazing. Um, I think you guys would get on so well, and he's going to love this. And my brain is
Yeah,
already
cool.
going like, okay, if there's a bunch of people, how do we film it? So it's like a little teaser where you have Lucy, and then it's like Lucy having the exact same vision with this person having the same vision, and then da 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 da, and all the pieces creating one big painting. Like, that's where my brain is going in my head
Yeah,
right now.
yeah,
So
yeah. You'll see. You'll see. You're gonna see. You're gonna see how it works.
okay. Oh
Oh
my
my
gosh, I'm excited. I'm
gosh.
excited.
But it's Emerald, and I know we probably got to wrap it up. This is like
Yeah.
it's been so awesome. It's been so fun talking to you guys.
Likewise.
Yeah.
We can talk again. Hopefully, you'll want to talk to me again after you read the novel.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's emeraldanvil.com is kind of the portal to everything. That can lead you to the podcast. that can lead you to pre-order the book. It can take you to the Kickstarter, which this isn't gonna, but this episode of Whimsy Gossip isn't going to come out until next week, right?
Yes. So Maya will
Mhm.
have the next episode already listened to by then. But anyway.
And the Kickstarter will be live. So, like, if your
Oh.
friend is a gamer, you can go to Kickstarter starting on Tuesday, and the Kickstarter will be live. But you can get to everything. You can find out about everything through emeraldanvil.com.
So
Okay.
when does the book come out again?
May 21st.
Oh my gosh, that's
Awesome.
so
You guys are
soon.
going to get it in about 10 minutes.
Yes. That makes me so
You can't-
excited. You have no
And
idea.
what about the game?
The Kickstarter, which board games are like a huge part of Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or vice versa. Board games now use Kickstarter a lot to get started.
Interesting.
So the Kickstarter starts April 23rd, Tuesday, and that'll run for 30 days, and then hopefully
Okay.
we'll be more than fully funded, and then we have to do the game is all designed and everything. We would have to finish the art, do the manufacturing. You actually have to make the game and ship the game and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know totally what the timeline is, but hopefully hopefully way less than a year, we'll actually be shipping games to people.
Yeah,
But the
well, we
video
can't wait.
actually,
We can't wait to play it.
yeah, but the video is super cool. The video, in terms of like if you go to our YouTube channel on Emerald Anvil on YouTube, you can look at the Glim trailer, and it
Okay.
definitely is the blending of reality and fantasy in the video. And you'll see what I'm saying when you see the video, because the video won't be on our on Kickstarter until it goes live on
Okay.
Tuesday. But you can go to our YouTube channel, and it's on there. And we
Yeah.
have a bunch
Okay.
of TikToks. We've only
Well, I'll
just
try to link everything that I can find below,
Mhm.
so that everyone can find out where all this stuff is. And I know the website will be a really good
yeah
thing
yeah.
to put down
A
below.
good portal. Haha.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, is there anything else that you would like to shout out before we wrap up, Greg? Anything else you
No, I
want?
mean,
I mean, that's a lot. You guys are
yeah,
doing
it's a lot.
amazing.
A lot. Thank you so much for having me on. It's this is exactly the kind of stuff that we need to be interacting with fans like you, who are just passionate fantasy fans who love to dig in. That's what we're trying to do, is like give people lots of stuff to dig into. So as things get more and more live, I think we're going to start building a little more momentum, because people are going to realize how much stuff that we're giving them to do.
And
Actually, you know what? I can show you some. This is like super rough prototype, right? So this is
Okay.
not what the like totally finished.
Ooh.
This is like the art from the game,
Yeah.
right? Um,
This
you,
is
you,
so
you guys are
cool.
Right.
getting a cool preview, right? So that's the way they look, right? So this is like, so these guys are from, that's a human, right? And then
Mhm.
this is a Hadin from Hogo Shah, and their glyphs are like interlocked green circles, and these are the bad guys. These are from Pydos, and they kind of have like dragony looking wings, and
This is so
that's their
cool.
symbol. And that's Aga. They kind of have bluish butterflyish wings. These are the walking, and they don't fly. Oh, look, see, you can tell this is a prototype, because we're like, no, that's a 2. Like,
Yeah, no worries.
so we're like changing the numbers, but the walking don't fly.
They can
They
just
Okay.
don't do glyphs, but they can do things with the glim that nobody else can do. That they're more like wizards and witches and whatnot. Yeah. So, and then you have these. Let's see, where's the one? You'll have these. You play as a character. I was just sitting here the whole time. I didn't even think about it. You play as a character. It's like 8 different characters, 2 from each of the 4 dominions, right? So they all have unique powers to them, and then this is, I'm almost hesitant to like show you the mat, because the real mat is going to be so much cooler. But you're going to play on this. play on this, you know, cloth board, which is a thing that Jen and Keith have done in other games, right? So those
Yeah.
symbols all equate to different things on the dice,
Wow.
right? So the dice don't are eight-sided dice that have the
Each
symbols
different
on them
symbol.
instead of numbers, right? So
Yeah.
it's
Wow.
about rolling the dice and then using the dice to get cards, and then the cards give you powers that change how you roll the dice later. So it's
Oh,
and
okay.
there's storytelling and stuff in it. Man, I know it's hard to explain, but I just think it's beautiful.
No.
It's an artist named
I'm
Lynn.
literally so excited to play this. I cannot wait.
Yeah, so super cool.
I love board games. They're so
I
much
think
fun.
it's a great board game. It really is, and it's not overly complicated. Um, but it's pretty simple. But it's also got a lot of like little nuanced strategies
Yeah.
that you can do. So
I
anyway,
love
thank you so
that.
much for letting me like geek out with
Oh
all
my
my
gosh,
Of
no,
personal.
thank you.
course,
Are you
Greg.
kidding?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Greg, I am telling you, after listening to like Black Velvet Fairies today, I feel like I was so excited to get on here. Like, oh my gosh, like I kind of was a little nervous. I was like, he's like the guy who's like behind all of this. Like I was like, oh
Oh
my
my gosh!
gosh,
Well, thank
okay.
you.
I
You guys
was
have
so
made my
excited.
day.
Oh no,
You've
you
made
made
my day.
ours. Well,
Okay.
tell
All right.
everyone
Oh,
on Black Velvet
Greg.
Fairies they're amazing. I'm a massive fan. I will be tuning in every
Yes.
Tuesday. And to all of our lovely listeners of Whimsy Gossip, make sure you are
And we
listening to
froze.
Black Velvet Fairies because I promise you this is not the
Yes.
last time I'm going to be talking about this. So,
Awesome, guys. Thank
Absolutely.
you so much. I really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
thank you.
Okay.
anytime.
We'll see you
Thank
later.
you, Greg. Have a
Love
good
y'all.
night.